And now, before we pass to the compatibility part, I want to make another video which is very important, which is about not capacity for happiness in relationship, but it is about just difficult positions regarding relationships in the horoscope. And there is difference between these two. If a person has some of those difficult positions for relationships, it's more because and they have a good capacity, they can be a very good and nice person to be in a relationship. But if they have the difficult positions that I'll give you now, it indicates that they have some more difficult karma in regards to relationships. So they can attract more difficult circumstances in relationships. But they themselves might have a great capacity for relationships. They might be loving, sweet, patient, but they might have some karma. Basically, they might have to pay some karmic debt, or they might have to complete something from past lives, or they might have to learn some lesson. That's why they have those more difficult combinations for relationships. And they usually would attract, before they settle down into a happy relationship, if they have those things that I'll talk about in their chart, they would attract a few difficult relationships with difficult compatibility, about which is the next section of the studies. You know, if two charts are compatible or no. And if you see someone with the combinations that I'm going to give you now, they might often attract people they're less compatible with. But if they have a good capacity for relationship, as the videos that we watched previously, that we studied, they would, you know, they can make the best out of even difficult relationships, with difficult circumstances, whether the person they're in love with is far away or is ill, or maybe, some outer circumstances, maybe financial problems. There's some obstacles that the person might meet with the other. But even if they have, they would attract difficult compatibility usually if they have these positions. But they can make the best of it if they have good capacity. But if they also have negative capacity, difficult capacity for relationship, they're also a pained person. And if they have those positions which indicate difficulties in relationships, in their circumstances overall, it might be very difficult for those people when it comes to relationships overall, because they can't make relationships and they'll attract difficult compatibility relationships, and they can't make the most of them either. So I want you to make the difference between those few positions that I'm going to give you and the capacity for happiness. It's much better to have a good capacity for happiness and a few difficult positions like the ones I'll give you now, because even when you attract less compatible relationships and a few difficult ones, you would not be such a pain person. You would not hurt the other so much, and you'd make the most of whatever run the relationship is meant to be. So one of the first things to look for, men and women both, is to see if you see together in any of the squares, or if you're using the circular chart, Venus, the planet of relationships, with one of the karmic nodes, Rahu or Ketu. They're always opposite each other. So if you see Venus here, for example, with Ketu, let's speak about Ketu. Why? Venus shows overall the conditions of our relationships, and when it's with Ketu, Ketu is one of the karmic planets which shows something has to be completed from past lives. So, and usually such people attract relationships, no matter if they have good capacity. They can be the most loving persons, they can have a really good capacity, like my partner has very good capacity for relationships overall. But he has Venus with Ketu, so he attracts, relationships that a partner which might not be, for example, fully can be more emotionally detached overall, can be more like not of this world, a bit more spiritual, not so capable in the material world in some way, because Ketu is a very spiritual influence. So they might attract relationship where the person either even is not concerned at all with material achievements, or it's kind of detached emotionally somehow, or often where it's like past life relationship, which is a little bit, when you have Venus Ketu, you often have at least one or two relationships in your life, especially at the beginning till you turn 35 or 40, where you attract someone you have to complete karma with from past life. Ketu is the planet of past life, about completion and endings of things. And usually such relationships, some karma has to be exhausted, and then the people part. And Venus has an emptying influence, so such a person will feel less and less pleasure and satisfaction and joy from relationships, or at least the ones that are the karmic relationships. So there will be like some dissatisfaction, some emptying of the feeling of fulfillment, which Venus, if it's good, can usually give in relationships. So there is kind of dissatisfaction there. But it's not the it's not like the person's fault per se because they're a difficult person. It's more like they're completing something from past life. And that's why this kind of disconnection happens usually in their relationships. Or you can have, for example, Venus with Rahu. If Venus is with Rahu, this is an indication that the person hasn't learned how to do relationships in past life. And the person might be a lovely person again. They can have a very good capacity to do relationships as per the previous videos, but they don't have experience what the rights, the rules of the game are. So they might make a few mistakes. They might get, seduced into other things easily, into relationships. They might, due to ignorance more than due to difficult character overall. So Venus Rahu again, usually they can be delayed in the fulfilling relationships again till 35, 40 onwards, because they're learning how to do relationships now. They attract foreign people that are very different than them, because Rahu is foreign influence. This again doesn't make them with low capacity. But when you have someone who is very different, who is foreign or somehow eccentric, which is Rahu, or the person might be disruptive, the person that they attract in relationships can be more disruptive, like Rahu, changeable. So it's not their fault, but it still creates difficulties when you have to work with someone or live with someone who's very different than you. You can usually Venus Rahu people attract, and Venus Ketu, less compatible people for them, because there is some karma to be fulfilled in this lifetime when it's with Rahu, but they have to learn how to do relationships. And you usually go to the universe, puts them in relationships which are more challenging, so they can learn the ins and outs of how to do relationships. So usually Venus Rahu, Venus Ketu people have a few relationships that they have to pass through, which can be more painful, more difficult, usually because of karma. If you have Venus Rahu, Venus Saturn, that's another difficult one. That's painful. Again, it can be it's not that the person has low capacity for relationship, it's that usually there's some kind of a Saturn shows where we've made mistakes in past lives and where we have to wait and be patient before we can receive some satisfaction in this lifetime. So usually again, karmic relationships are attracted, relationships that the person, or if for example someone in a past life has neglected a partner, or not given much priority to relationship, or taken advantage of a relationship, or done something that is kind of unhealthy in a relationship. Now in this lifetime, Venus Saturn shows them that they have to wait before they find fulfillment in relationships. Again, Saturn matures around 35. Usually after 30, these people's relationships start getting better. But usually there is a sense of starvation, a sense of, too many responsibilities. The outer circumstances are more blocking, because Saturn is blocking influence. Again, the person can have great capacity for relationship, but outside, before, certain age, these people tend to attract more painful relationships overall, less compatible. For example, Jennifer Aniston has a great capacity for relationship. Her moon is doing well. Her moon, her fourth house from the moon, her fourth house cusp as well. But she has Venus with Saturn, so she's had to learn karmic lessons through that. So she attracted, maybe she was very nice in relationship. Can you imagine her being a monster? I mean, even her personality looks so lovely, But with Venus Saturn, she had to go through some heartbreak, some pain, because these are lessons her soul chose to learn in this lifetime, either paying back for past mistakes. And Saturn makes us wait, again I repeat, and gives us difficulty so we can appreciate something more. When something is hard-earned, if something you have to wait so long and work so hard on to have as a relationship, then you appreciate it much more. You kind of pay off the karma. So later in life, these people have better relationships. If they marry before 35, the relationship can feel very full of responsibilities, of blockages, of burdens, maybe that's why she divorced Brad Pitt. So these are Venus Ketu, Venus Saturn, Venus Rahu are some of the difficult indications when they're conjunct. And the closer they are together, the more difficult it is, and such people would attract less compatible partners, at least to a certain period in their life. So if you see someone with those positions, Venus with the Sun, that's another one that shows difficulties in relationships overall, but no low capacity for relationship. Venus with Sun, the Sun burns and frustrates whatever planet it is with. The king burns. It's too bright. So basically such people might go, especially the close Venus is to the Sun. It's within 10 degrees especially, it's very strongly felt. Such people can often, Venus is invisible, they can attract relationships which are hidden, the karma might be to be in relationships which are, they have to make sacrifice because the sun wants us to make sacrifice because of high ideals, because of goals in life, because of something again outer happens that puts obstacles on the path of the person's relationships. And sun has frustrating influence. It's like you're burned. Imagine when you sit under the sun and you're so close to it and all day long and you're burned. So there's like frustration there. But if Venus is further away than 10 degrees from the sun, it's not as painful because Venus is always very close to the sun. A lot of people have Venus with the sun in the same sign. But if it's 10 degrees away, it's not so badly combust, but still this is one of the indications for difficulties in relationship. And again, not low capacity for relationship, just like outer circumstances, certain blockages, certain sacrifices. The sun wants sacrifices. The ancient used to do sacrifices in fire. The fire is the element of the sun. So whatever is in the rays of the sun has to be sacrificed in a certain point of the person's life. It does not mean they'll forever have difficulties in their relationship, but these are some of the things they have to pass through. So it's immediately, these are like exclamation points you have to remember. And then another one, especially for men who have Venus with the moon. I know so many of them. Venus with the moon, sorry. Why is this? Because the moon in particular is an enemy of Venus. Even though this makes, in a woman's chart for good capacity for relationship, it makes her sweet, charming, But particularly for men, when Venus is with the moon, I think Tom Cruise has this combination. It makes someone who is very, is not very objective in relationship because the moon is, Venus wants to be objective and the moon hides the objectivity and is too emotional, gets overly emotional about relationship, or he can attract women who are overly emotional, who are overly needy in relationships as well, or he can be like that himself. So that's another thing, but he can have good capacity for relationship, but if he has Venus with moon, I have a best friend with this position. He's a fantastic guy, the most responsible, good looking, charming personality. He has very good capacity for relationship in his horoscope overall, but he has Venus with moon. So he's always attracted women who are needy or with a lot of emotionalism there, with a lot of, the moon is feelings, emotions, with a lot of, they have too many needs and they expect from the relationships to satisfy, all their needs, so they're difficultly satisfied. So that's one of the things such people have to go through. So that's another painful position for men in particular, not so much for women. So any of those, if you see, it already shows that there will be some difficulties in relationships. But if the person has good capacity, they will be able to do the best with those relationships. If the person has poor capacity in one of those positions, it gets very hard for their relationship. And another thing I want you to see is if you have one of those planets in the 7th house, if you have Saturn in the 7th house, 7th house is the house of relationship, just like Venus is the planet of relationships. If you see Saturn in the 7th house, again it shows some karma in relationships, some delays before the person settles. Maybe someone they have an age difference, bigger age difference, maybe having to pay off certain debts before they can be happy in relationship. And whatever Saturn is, we feel like more lack, we feel like things happen with more difficulty there. The circumstances in our life are more difficult in regards to those relationships, more responsibilities, more duties, having to wait, having to overcome pain and things like that. So usually, again, but such people are very faithful. When they have Saturn in the 7th house, once they get married, once they get committed, they'll stay there to the bitter end. So it's not so bad. Usually after 30, 35, the person can become very, very happy and settled in relationships. But before that, usually there's some delays. Often I've seen people like this get married in their 40s, or a marriage that is later is much more happier. But if they have good capacity, they will not be pained people to be with. And that's the worst thing. If you have poor capacity for relationship, you're pained to be with. You make a drama out of everything. You don't know how to act in a way not to hurt your partner, These things just show difficult circumstances around your relationships. Okay. And Rahu or Ketu in the 7th house, it's part of the capacity video that we watched, because if Rahu or Ketu are here, The opposite will always be in the ascendant, and we talk that these create, one of the difficult indications for capacity in relationships. But they also are painful for relationships. Rahu in the 7th house it's often an indication for cheating. It's often an indication for being, always seeing the grass is green on the other side and having to do more relationships before you learn how to do relationships. Being quite desirous in relationships as well. Being like always seeing something and wanting it and desiring it. But this becomes part of the personality as well, because Ketu comes in the ascendant, or if Ketu is here in the 7th house, Rahu comes in the ascendant and becomes part of the person's personality and makes it a more pained person overall. But if you see Rahu in particular, it's one of the indications this person can have some cheating in their life, more than one marriage. It's just what fate has for them to experience. They can be more easily swayed by their partners to, or seduced easily. If it's Ketu, it shows like some karmic relationships that have to end, they have to let go, they have to detach from relationships. They need to have relationships which are less codependent rather than ones where everyone is into the other's life too much, And if you see someone with Ketu in the 7th house, advise them, focus on yourself, work on finding your true vocation, who you are, and then your relationships will improve. If you see Rahu in the 7th, tell these people to learn how to keep their promise, to learn not to get easily swayed by others, seductions, not to, if they make commitment, to stay with the commitment. And Rahu in the 7th again brings foreigners or eccentric people in their life, which can be, it's more difficult compatibility usually. So these people with Rahu or Ketu in the 7th house attract people with more difficult compatibility. With Ketu, again, it can be someone who is more spiritual, more detached, relationships that is not fully involved in some way. So this is another painful position. But the person themselves also can be a bit pained as well, because immediately it goes, the opposite planet, Rahu, Ketu, goes into the personality, ascendant, or, into the ascendant sign. So Rahu, Ketu, Saturn are painful in the 7th house. Again, overall, they create more difficulties in relationship. With Saturn, you can tell the person to, to be more patient, to not to rush into relationship until they mature, to learn how to let go of pain and being hurt, because Saturn keeps up to the pain, or with Saturn, Venus is the same. With Rahu or Ketu, it's some karmic lessons there, Again, some delays before happy relationships. Or if they marry earlier, they have more obstacles, so to speak, in the relationship. And also you can check if the ruler of the 7th house, the table that you have at the beginning of the manual, a circle where it shows what planet rules what sign. So you can go to the planetary to the house cusp table, look at the 7th house cusp and see what sign is there. 7, say if it's Libra, it means Venus rules it. Or if it's Virgo, it means Mercury rules it. If it's Capricorn in the 7th house cusp, it means Saturn rules it, So check the planet which rules the sign on the 7th house cusp of relationship. If this planet is with Rahu, Ketu, or Saturn, not the Sun anymore, just Rahu, Ketu, or Saturn, it can create similar problems. They're not as intense as if that planet was inside the 7th house, but still, if it's with the ruler of the 7th house, the Lord, which is responsible for taking care of the 7th house of relationship, it will give half the intensity of the effects, but there can be some of the delays, some of the karmic lessons to learn, some of the karmic lessons of letting go, like Ketu, or some of the karmic lessons of controlling their passions with Rahu, or some of the karmic lessons of patience. So these are, and there is another thing I want you to check, which it's a bit more difficult to check, but this is for those of you who want to get more in depth, because this is really one that really strongly resonates. I don't have divisional chart, but checking the dignity of Venus in a divisional chart, my teacher has a calculator with all the divisional charts. We need only the 7 divisional chart of relationships and the 9 divisional chart of marriage. The 9 divisional chart is the chart of the soulmate, of commitment, long-term commitment, like marriage. The 7 divisional chart is the chart of being excited and happy with a partner, of relationships overall, of dating, of how productive you can be with someone, your sex life as well. And you can go to Vault of Heaven. I'm giving you a link here. Enter your details, and because there you'll see the divisional charts. And once you get the table, the chart, scroll down to the smaller charts below. There are like 16 smaller charts below. And they'll be showed either like that, the Indian style, or South Indian style, or North Indian style. You can choose the North Indian style, which I use, you know, before you take the chart, because there is a choice. You can do South or North Indian. I use this one, which is the North Indian, or was it the South? I'm not sure. But it's not the default setting. You have to change it in this. And I want you to go to the 7 divisional chart. Basically, it's 7th and 9th divisional chart. It's the divisional charts. The main chart, which is kind of folded 7-fold or 9-fold, and the planets receive different sign positions and different house positions, but we're looking only at the sign position. And I want you to look at the 7 divisional and 9 divisional chart at Venus. Say Venus is here. Just look at the sign there. The sign is indicated with smaller letters. And I want you to see, if you see the letters VI, which is Virgo, this is where Venus is debilitated. And also, in the main chart, from our birth chart calculator, if you see Venus in Virgo, it's another indication of some kind of starvation in relationships, the person not feeling fully fulfilled. But if Venus, in particular in the 7 divisional chart of relationship and 9 divisional chart of marriage, is in the sign of Virgo, which is debilitated, that's the only thing you need to check, if it's in Venus. Often such people are not very happy or fulfilled in relationships. And it doesn't make them with poor capacity for relationships. They can be amazing husband, amazing wife, but within they feel emptiness, because Venus in Virgo feels starved. Venus in Virgo is its position of debilitation where it's weak, so the person doesn't feel the affection or does not feel the connection. When it's in the 7th house, 7 divisional sign, like I have, well, I'm not going to tell you, Venus in the 7 divisional chart, they might not be, the sex life might not be so satisfying. There might be the ability to, co-create together might be less satisfying together, The feeling of being in love might be diminished there. Or if Venus is in Virgo in the 9 divisional chart, these people are unhappy in marriages. They can be fantastic husbands or wife, and particularly for men, having Venus in Virgo in the 9th, often I've seen these men, if they're not naturally cheaters, they can fall in love with another person while they're married because they feel starved while in the marriage for some reason. And they often, this is one of the indications of having affairs. And not because the person is an asshole, but because the person in this lifetime just feels more starved when in long committed relationships or in the sexual life and experience with the person. For men, Venus, is in particular in Virgo, indicates such, for women as well, they'll feel it. But they can be, more productive, while for men, it's definitely, when I see men with Venus in the 9 divisional chart in Virgo, it's often a sign this man can fall in love with someone once he's already in a committed relationship. And it's not like desire to cheat or sexual drive that puts such guy or people or women to cheat. It's more like inner dissatisfaction and fulfillment. They can be still great in their marriage. They can do all their responsibilities. If they have good capacity, they can be very loving to their spouse. But within, they always feel this disconnection from the fullness of experience. So that's one of the indications that someone might be more susceptible to affairs, so to a bit less happiness in the marital life. Now I have one of this position. My mom has it in the 7th and in the 9th house. She's still married. She has a great capacity for relationship. But, it's never been fully, let's say, satisfying on all levels. But she's still married. She's still in a relationship 30 years now, been only with one man. She hasn't cheated. But there is the full spectrum of feelings and emotions have not been fully there in some way. For women, it's it's a bit less painful than for men there, because men try and find it through compensating with another partner usually. For women sometimes it can happen as well. But these are the indications. Learn them, remember them. I'll enumerate them in the manual. If you see such things, you have to warn the person, and give them advice what to do, to work on themselves. And such people usually, they consciously chose to be in such relationships. They consciously, their soul when it was born, chose to experience being in such relationships. If they have Venus with in Virgo in the 7 or 9 divisional chart, Venus with Saturn, with the Sun, to learn some lessons. So thank you very much, and we'll go into compatibility now.